Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. As-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. In the past, there have been many debates among philosophers and psychologists about the basis for moral values, akhlaq. The secular scholars define the basis for akhlaq to be opinion-based. For example, one opinion is that the basis for moral value is indulgence. Whatever I like to do, I do because it feels good, hence morally okay. Or the basis for akhlaq is what benefits me. Whatever is to my benefit or the societal benefit based on my opinion is the basis for my akhlaq. There have been some people who follow Epicurus, the Greek philosopher, who said the moral and ethics are defined and sought in pleasure. He said the real akhlaq is for a person to find out what satisfies him and his wishes, then go after it. Obviously, this is an extremely objectionable and dangerous view. Hence, they say when he saw his followers were engaging in anything and everything that pleases them and follow it literally, which had caused many problems in the society, he then revised his statement and said that he meant being content and satisfied, not just doing whatever people want to indulge in. Even now, we see people, especially in the West, have the notion that there's nothing morally wrong with engaging in anything a person desires and sees pleasure in. In fact, that is moral. We can criticize such definition or philosophy of akhlaq as follows. Number one, there are many pleasures in life that are momentary, and due to their long-lasting impact or harms that follows, they bring about regret and sorrow. And in some cases, much trouble follows these short-lived pleasures. Number two, many people who immersed themselves in these momentary pleasures or go to extremes will harm themselves through illnesses, diseases, and even mental diseases due to overindulgence. Furthermore, because indulgence and seeking pleasure does not require a willpower, their sense of commitment and willpower has diminished. They can no longer resist to indulgence and pleasure that requires willpower. Hence, they often submit to things that they should not and humiliate themselves in trying to get to what they desire. From a social perspective, seeking certain desires has caused much friction and conflicts among the members of the society who are seeking the same pleasure, hence conflicts and hostilities occur as a result. This is why we say defining akhlaq by seeking any pleasure and desire is objectionable in many ways. Then there are those whose akhlaq is defined by cost and benefit analysis. They say we live in a society which is based on give and take, based on cost and benefit or loss and return. Hence, we need to adjust our ethics and moral values accordingly. They add, we use our intellect and we take that which is beneficial to me and society as ethical and moral, and that which is harmful to the society as unethical or immoral. Even these people can be criticized on two fronts. Number one, akhlaq, moral value, is an honorable matter and cannot be measured with material and monetary values because these are superficial indicators and standards. People who subscribe to this philosophy will sometimes lie and sometimes tell the truth, according to where their benefit and material interests lie. He may commit an indecent act in order to benefit from something in personal or societal level. If he's asked why he did it, he will say that there was a benefit in it for me. And in another exact case, there was not. As a result, there is really no standard or criterion to measure against. Hence, akhlaq is no longer an absolute, a constant. Rather, something relative, something subjective. Second objection is the harmful consequences. Why? Because when we rely solely on our intellect, aql, and ignore the divine laws and revelations, then something that might seem beneficial to you, it may not appear beneficial to others. Thus, you will have this conflict of interest because this realization is not dependent on just one person's intellect, but on many individuals with differing interests. There are also other forces that influence our aql, intellect, like desires, selfishness, self-interest, etc. All affect how we think and judge things, how they affect our views on what is beneficial and what is not. On the other hand, if the person is a believer and accepts the divine laws and revelations which teach moral values, then his intellect will be intact, unaffected by his own desires or others' demands and whispers. He will say, "Nope, this is God's ruling and I will not deviate from it. Stop whispering." Whereas if he leaves it all to his own intellect, then when he realizes something is harmful, hence unethical, immoral, other forces within him will influence his intellect and force him to justify using his intellect. Like, I know this is wrong, but only this once. Or due to such and such, or due to my circumstances, I have needs. How do I take care of my family? Or, well, it's not a bribe. The guy is giving me the money willingly. And at any case, I'm doing something for him. Or, this person loves me and cares for me so I can have a sexual relationship with him or her. Eventually, we will get married, etc. You see, it's not just aql. There are other forces that influence one's judgment and thoughts. After a while, the person will train his intellect, his aql, to manufacture excuses, false excuses, in order for him to justify his behavior. So much so that eventually a bad behavior and immoral acts look like to him okay. As the Quran reminds us, زُيِّنَ لَهُ سُوءُ عَمَلِهِ فَرَآهُ حَسَنًا, whose bad or evil deeds seem attractive and virtuous to him. He does something immoral or unethical, yet it seems like a good deed to him, all because he allowed his mind to justify it. Therefore, you cannot leave it all to aql alone. Without the divine laws behind it, you can justify anything, any act. Most people who did bad things throughout the history, they thought they were doing the right thing. And then there were those who knew what they were doing was wrong, but did it anyway through justifications. Yet there is another basis for moral values, akhlaq, which is the true one, and that is religion, which those who subscribe to it believe the religious moral values come from the divine source, the one who created us and planted some of these values in our nature, plus the values he taught us through his religion. Within this context, what is religion or religiosity? According to our view, it is a tafsir or spiritual and moral interpretation of the creation or the universe, be it the creation of mankind or mankind's external world. When you study the Quran, you will see that the whole system of creation glorifies and worships God. يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ. All that is in the heavens and all that is in the earth glorifies Allah. To Him belongs the kingdom and to Him belongs praise. Meaning, this universe, or all that is in the heavens and all that is in the earth, is religious. This includes mankind, which means mankind is a religious being. فأقم وجهك للدين حنيفا فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها. So direct your face, your attention toward the religion. Incline into truth. Adhere to the fitrah of Allah upon which He has created all mankind. Meaning, everyone has a religious dimension. Therefore, religion, deen, is a spiritual and moral view of the creation, a divine interpretation of the creation. In a sense, the whole creation is religious and moral. Now let's explain this a bit more. Stay with me. When you view the whole universe as a universe without a source, without a beginning, and without an end, if you do, it will have no religious or spiritual moral interpretation. However, when you believe that universe has a source and a beginning and an end, and it has a goal, which is the resurrection and return to the Creator, and that there is a divine will presiding over the universal order, you then will have a spiritual interpretation and a moral view of the world. Hence, the essence of religion is this very spiritual interpretation of the world and the moral view of the world. Why moral view? Because deen is not just divine or just about the spirituality. It is rather always accompanied by moral teachings, moral interpretation of creation. A deen, a religion without morality, can be very destructive, as we have seen throughout the history, by those who think of religion as spirituality only. There is the religious dimension in every person, by which all people have tendencies to see the world as spiritual, and some choose to do so and some don't. Hence, mankind is also a spiritual and religious being by the virtue of his nature or this dimension that we talked about. When we look at the universe and the mankind in this way, by believing in man's source and origin and finality or destination as well as the universe, we have indeed made a spiritual, a divine and moral interpretation of the creation. Now, what do we mean by this moral interpretation or akhlaqi tafsir? Well, firstly, what is the definition of akhlaq? In reality, akhlaq or moral values is that which separates good and bad. It separates beauty and ugliness. To illustrate, let's give an example of an event that actually happened back in Tabaristan, a province south of Caspian Sea, when a ruling party came to power known as Zaydiyah. In one of the expeditions, the distinguished governor, king in that region, rescued a warrior from their enemy camp. Then he promoted him and married his daughter to him. And later, he decided to retire from his post due to old age and let his son-in-law take over the governance. Once in power, his son-in-law jailed the father-in-law, fearing that his father-in-law, being popular, might someday decide to take back the power, the rule. He then jailed the man who rescued him from the enemy camp, brought him to the palace, married his daughter to him, gave him the position of governor. Is this not an ugly act? Of course it is. And there are so many similar stories throughout the history. Now, we can interpret the story this way: harming a harmless person due to fear of rivalry, or repaying good with bad, or sets a bad precedent to others so others may follow, or where good and goodness is threatened. All this becomes a societal tafsir or interpretation of this event. However, I want to say, before you evaluate the ramifications of this event and the reasons behind each, as in social interpretation, before any of these, upon hearing the story, your immediate reaction is, what an immoral act. Hence, akhlaq, moral value, is a judgment call of conscience, even before we consider the societal ramifications. This judgment call of conscience is within man's nature. I don't want to say we should not analyze the ramifications. What I want to say is, before even doing that, the judgment call of conscience within our fitra, nature and intellect, says this was an evil and ugly act. As the Quran says in chapter 91, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, by the soul, nafs, and him who perfected it, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, and inspired it with conscience of what is wrong for it and what is right for it. The word alhamaha means the moral values are inspired in mankind, meaning the essence of our fitra, nature and intellect, has tendencies to both beauty and good works, as well as ugliness and bad works. These verses highlight the fact our nafs, which is inspired, as in our fitra, with conscience that knows what's good for it and what's bad for it. Then one who makes the effort to purify it or chooses to purify it will be successful. And one who chooses to corrupt it will be a failure. As such, we condemn the actions of son-in-law in the story and admire the actions of the old governor, who did so many favors to his son-in-law. And later, when people saw his imprisonment by the son-in-law, they rebelled against him, ousted him, and brought back the father-in-law. And when he took over, he forgave and pardoned his son-in-law. At our very basic instinct and conscience, the father-in-law's actions are admirable, regardless of all the implications that can result or follow. Contrary to those who think akhlaq relies solely on external harms and benefits and then make it relative, hence subjective, we believe akhlaq or moral values are deeply rooted in man's nature, intellect, and conscience. A normal intellect rejects many ugly actions and approves many good actions, just like seeing beauty and wretchedness. When you see something that is beautiful, it usually comes to you naturally, and you admire it without even thinking too deep or analyzing it. Same with wretchedness. Therefore, as the Quran says, akhlaq has a natural source within us and our consciousness. Now, just like looking at mankind and His morality when we look at the creation and see its precise order, design, beauty, and harmony. In our minds, we then establish a source for it. We then see God's signs and manifestations throughout His creation. In such universal view, we glorify the Creator and say He is complete, He is perfect, He is the sovereign. The whole universe reflects His work. From moral values standpoint, He is perfect. He does not commit injustice. So then, our interpretation of His universe will be a respectful, spiritual, religious, and moral one. This is clearly indicated in the Quran as well, when it says all that is in the heavens and all that is in the earth glorifies Allah. To Him belongs the kingdom, and to Him belongs praise, which defines Allah as a divine being worthy of all praise and glorification. As we read in chapter 2, angels said, نَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. While we declare your praise and sanctify you. Of course, according to the Quran, mankind also acknowledged this fact in his fitrah, by nature. When he was asked by Allah, am I not your Lord? They responded, yes, and we bear witness that you are. Now we get to real source of akhlaq, or the basis for moral values. In many secular societies today, religion is a spiritual matter, something that has to do with the divine, but it's not a source for moral values. In such societies, people may have certain biases or respect toward certain rules and beliefs within religion, but they do not consider the moral dimension of it as basis for moral values. Their secular moral values come strictly from the return and loss or cost and benefit consideration. Whereas we, believers, view the moral dimension inseparable from the religious and say any creed or thought that is based on corrupt or immoral values is an immoral or corrupt creed itself. To explain further, you read in the Quran, certain things are forbidden because Islam looks at them through a moral or akhlaqi lens, whereas the modern world looks at them through an economic return and loss lens. For example, regarding riba, usury, the Quran says in chapter 2, those who consume usury shall not rise up from their tomb except as he who raises in madness that Satan has touched. That is because they say selling or trade is like usury, while Allah has permitted trading and forbidden usury. Meaning, generally speaking, dealing with usury is a satanic work because it is a form of exploitation, hence immoral. Islam is saying in a society that you have people who are in real need of funds, hence ask for a loan. Of course, they must be in need, otherwise why ask? You cannot exploit their real need in order to inflate your wealth with high rates of return, gaining a wage you did not work for. Rather, as personal wealth, you are to take care of those in need. But people do a return on loss analysis, see the financial gain, and ignore the moral aspect. Another example, the Quran forbids drinking alcohol and gambling, as it says in chapter 2, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمِهِمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. They ask you about drinking intoxicant and gambling, say in them is great sin and yet some benefit for people. But their sin is greater than their benefit. You notice the verse says there is some benefit but great sin in both, not great loss or great harm in them. It does not put harm against benefit, rather sin against benefit, gives it a moral dimension. So the Quran makes it a moral issue and explains in another verse why. As we read in chapter 5, indeed, Shaitan or Satan seeks to stir up enmity and hatred among you by means of drinking intoxicant and gambling, and to keep you away from the remembrance of Allah and from praying. Will you not abstain from them? Hence, it becomes a moral issue when Shaitan wants to cause animosity, hostility, and hatred among you. Furthermore, to keep you away from remembrance of God and from acts of worship. Hence, you see many people who drink and gamble often do not even think about God, much less remembering Him or praying to Him. Quran does not say drinking alcohol is bad for your liver or bad for your blood pressure or your heart, because that would take the discussion to issue of harms, which in response one could say, hey, I want to drink now, and so what if I live few years less? I want to enjoy it now. So that would not be a real argument. Hence the Quran says drinking is against akhlaq, based on reasons given in the verse we mentioned. Same with other issues like war, that firstly it talks about the reason why a war should even begin. Defining a legitimate war in chapter 4, it says, and why is it that you do not fight in the cause of Allah and for the oppressed among men, women, and children who say, our Lord, take us out of the city of oppressive people and appoint for us from yourself a protector and appoint for us from yourself a helper. Meaning, fighting should only be for the cause of God, not for territories or conquest. Why not fight in the cause of God to liberate, to help, to defend those who are oppressed, men, women, and children, who have no way out? Every generation or era has its own oppressed regions and oppressed people. Today we have places like Syria, Yemen, and other alike who pray that God send them help. The verse asks, why are you not fighting for a just cause? Why are you quiet? It takes the discussion to a moral level. Does not say fight so you can conquer a territory and exploit its people. Same methodology of applying moral dimension in economic issues, in family issues, in social issues, and forbidden and permitted issues. The Quran is packed with moral values. I don't want to get into all the moral lessons from the Quranic perspective here in this lecture, but we had a two-part series lecture called Moral Teachings in the Quran, Akhlaq, which you can refer to for more details. So we say we should rely on our intellect, aql, which comes from our fitra, essence, plus the divine rules and teachings of akhlaq from our deen. Both combined will teach us akhlaq in absolute terms as a constant. Like an example, acting on a promise is good. Betraying someone's trust is bad. Justice is good. Transgression and injustice are bad, no matter how small. While aql may recognize these to be good or bad by itself, the divine moral teachings help keep them absolute constant without other forces' influence. Plus, Islam gives us a role model, that is, the moral, ethic, and behavior of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when it comes to anything related to akhlaq, to be followed as a fine example. One whom Allah calls in the Quran, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You have indeed attained a high moral standard. As you know, he was a true manifestation or application of high moral standard, and the Quran again confirms in chapter 33, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You have indeed in the messenger of Allah a fine example to follow in conduct. He is your role model when it comes to akhlaq. In other words, it is one thing to read the rules in morality and akhlaq, but it is another thing to see someone practicing it completely and to the best way, and that is the tradition of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. By the way, our Prophet had the highest level of iman and akhlaq, so much so that there is absolutely no report whatsoever from his companions and followers, as well as his enemies, that he ever, even once, used a foul word. No reporter or writer, European, Muslim or non-Muslim, even his critics, has ever been able to deny his level of iman, dedication, and moral conduct. Another point about the religious-based akhlaq versus the secular akhlaq is that secular akhlaq and those influenced by Greek philosophy do not pay attention to the last day, or do not believe in or consider the day of accountability, whereas religious, especially Islamic akhlaq, is based on the resurrection day, qiyamah, and hereafter. Islamic teaching of akhlaq is not only focused on this life, but also wants to teach its followers to think of the resurrection day as well. Hence, lead a conduct that is not only approved for this life, but also approved and allowed in the last day, because, as you know, once we die, we will never die again. There is no death in hereafter. As such, a believer must really think and put his life in order. Tune his life in preparation for an everlasting life to come. Just like we put a lot of effort in preparing and providing ourselves a good life in this world, which is really for a very limited time we're here on earth, then of course we need to put the same effort, if not more, preparing for the everlasting life to come. In conclusion, when you consider or think of deen or religion as spirituality or divine matter only, and not considering its moral aspect, then you will find religious but immoral people, like you will find within a so-called Islamic Republic or Islamic Emirate, or any religious government or any religion, government of any religion, overzealous groups who under the banner of divine or holy or sacred or spiritual commit all sorts of crimes and injustices, such as corruption and systematic killing and torture of their opposition, etc., because they come to believe anything is allowed for their cause and end justifies the means. So they frame, they slander, they vilify, and then they have their 10 minutes courts and sentence their opposition to jail, torture, and death, all justified by their holy cause. They even fabricate or use false narrations and reports, misinterpret and misrepresent the religious text in order to justify their actions. Not even a hint of moral lesson in their belief and actions. Even at individual level, many Muslims consider deen as a spirituality or a divine matter only, not about moral matters. They will adjust their moral values based on time and conditions, and some even force the Quran or tradition text to justify it. Why? Because deen for them is about spirituality only, not about spirituality and moral values, which is one of the main reasons for religion to begin with. The Quran says some Jews used to think this way. They said religion is a set of rules and rituals for the purpose of spirituality and does not address moral values. Hence, if we take a Jew's possession, it is problematic because he is one of us. But if we take a non-Jewish person's possession, it's okay because we have no obligations toward them. As we read in chapter 3, among the people of the scripture, there is he who, if you trust him with a weight of treasure, he will return it to you. And among them, there is he who, if you trust him with a dinar, a piece of gold, he will not return it to you unless you keep standing over him, demanding it. That is because they say we have no duty to the Gentiles, common people. They lie against Allah knowingly. They think of religion as a formality. However, Islam is a moral religion. It has moral values which come as a package. You cannot separate its spirituality, its rules and rituals aspect from its moral aspect. Those who take out its moral aspect then become capable of doing anything immoral, as they justify any mean to reach their goal, whether in an individual level or at presiding over a nation level. It is the attitude and conduct of these so-called Muslims that has given an untrue perception of Muslims and Islam to others around the world. Whereas true believers think the moral values and teachings of Islam are inseparable from its spirituality and theological aspect. As such, they would never justify or resort to lies, cheating, deception, indecency, corruption, and despotism. In this modern world, Akhlaq, moral values of Islam, should be at the forefront of attitude and actions of any Muslim anywhere around the world. So it demonstrates the most prominent quality, Islamic moral values, that stand out to any non-Muslim. It is the Islamic ethical and moral values coupled with true belief in God and submission to Him that impacts others' hearts and minds, especially in da'wah, invitation works. It is under these auspices that Islam will grow and what pleases God. Westerners are ahead of us in certain aspects of akhlaq because they measure akhlaq with near-term return and loss or benefit and harm criteria. For example, they see the harms of bribery to the society in spreading corruption, etc. Hence, they make laws against it. However, at the same time, through this secular morality, due to this return loss criterion, they allow anything and everything as long as they perceive no harm in it. For example, uncommitted sexual relationship between a man and a woman is allowed as long as it is consensual based on their perception. That is, it harms no one. Or someone drinking in privacy of his home may be okay from the secular morality point of view because of perception of no harm, no foul. Whereas religious morality does not allow, based on its moral values, which is deeply rooted in man's nature, fitra, plus belief in Qiyamah, resurrection, and hereafter. Hence, its basis is constant. In today's societies, especially the secular West, morality is relative and subjective. It has no roots in man's nature or divine origin and teaching. As such, it is subjected to many clashes and conflicts. For example, you look at the gun laws here in the US. On the one hand, you are allowed to purchase and own a variety of guns as an adult. And for kids, you have games of war and violence involving all sorts of guns, attracting young kids and teaching them about gun shooting. On the other hand, you have this high-tech, sophisticated, and elaborately equipped security and police apparatus who are tasked to search and find the armed criminals, engage with them, often in shootings, arrest them, kill them, or jail them. Then they have the Hollywood action movies on how the criminals use guns to commit a variety of crimes, and how this sophisticated police force pursues these criminals throughout the movie and find them and either arrest them or kill them in the process. Is this not contradictory? On the other hand, you facilitate easy purchase and ownership of any gun and acclimate the kids from early age. On the other hand, you spend lots of manpower and capital to capture the criminals who use these guns to perpetrate all sorts of crimes, like the recent mass shootings. This is contradictory. Same thing with issue of consensual sex, rape, and abortion. One must devise a way to prevent the crime from happening right at the root cause. Unfortunately, religion in many cultures has become a series of formalities, rules and traditions and rituals, but not about moral values. Considering the Muslim world, we're not ahead of the West in technology or unable to catch up with them, but what they do not have in the West is the absolute moral values and tawheed that Islam teaches, which we should let the whole world know about, so that when a non-Muslim encounters a Muslim, should immediately realize he's dealing with a person of high moral values. As the saying goes, a Muslim is the one who is trustworthy and people feel safe with. As we have multitude of examples of such Muslim personalities throughout Islamic history. We do not want to be labeled as those who are religious but not moral, as those who think of religion as spiritual formalities, rules, and rituals, but not akhlaqi, or source of moral values. Hence, have all the corruption, lack of progress, chaos, etc. Anyone who has defined deen as such, especially Islam, he has not defined it properly. That is, not the deen. Those who think akhlaq is not part of the deen, part of Islam, they have betrayed Islam. They have misinterpreted and misrepresented Islam to the world. Our faith is an embodiment of akhlaq, moral values. This is our message to the entire world. May Allah make us among the true representatives of His deen and help us do that which we say we do. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.